Welcome to the deep dive. So today we are shortcutting your path through one of the really big philosophical mysteries, consciousness.
That's right.
Specifically, we're diving deep into panpsychism. This is, well, it's a pretty radical idea, isn't it? That consciousness isn't just some biological fluke happening in brains,
Right.
but maybe a fundamental feature of the entire universe.
Exactly. And you can see the appeal, especially for philosophers. It suggests that fundamental physical things, think quarks, photons, they already possess some kind of basic, tiny, conscious experience.
Okay.
It's really an attempt to grab the best parts of both materialism and dualism. You keep the causal power of materialism.
Which is crucial.
Absolutely. But you also respect that strong feeling we have that consciousness is something real and unique, and you try to dodge the huge problems that normally hit both traditional views.
So the idea is we bake consciousness right into the fabric of reality from the get-go. Seems neat. But our sources are pretty clear this apparently elegant solution hits a massive wall almost immediately.
It really does.
Like, if consciousness is truly everywhere, in every little particle, then why is my experience right now listening to this thinking, why is it a single unified thing? Why isn't it just trillions of tiny separate little feelings buzzing around?
That is precisely the combination problem. It's the absolute core challenge. How do the experiences of countless, individual fundamental entities combine? Or you could say, how do they compose themselves?
To create this complex, unified, single consciousness that we experience as, well, being human.
That's the question. And it's not new. The classic formulation goes way back, nearly 130 years, to William James. He was deeply skeptical of what he called the mind dust theory.
Right, mind dust.
And he had these really memorable analogies to show the difficulty. He said, look, if you take 100 basic feelings, no matter how you shuffle and pack them, each one stays shut in its own skin, windowless. They don't merge.
Windowless, yeah, they stay separate.
And this point is just crucial because it attacks the main claim, the constitutive claim. James argued that if these little elemental feelings did somehow create a new group consciousness.
Like a higher level one.
Exactly. That new state, he called it the 101st feeling. It wouldn't just be the sum of the parts. It would be a totally new fact about the world.
Ah, so you couldn't just deduce it from the original 100 feelings. It would have to be something genuinely new, emergent.
Precisely. Which is exactly what constitutive panpsychism is trying desperately to avoid.
Yeah.
They want the macro consciousness to be made of, not just caused by, the micro consciousness.
His sentence analogy really makes this clear for the listener, I think.
It does.
You take a sentence, say a dozen words, give one word each to 12 different people. You can line them up, push them together, whatever. But James says nowhere will there be a consciousness of the whole sentence. The individual minds, the private experiences of each word, they just don't add up to an understanding of the entire phrase.
They just don't sum.
Yeah.
Now, to really grapple with how people try to solve this, we need to get our terms straight, just quickly.
Okay.
We're talking about the microphysical world, quarks, electrons, that level. And the idea is they have tiny microphenomenal experiences, little bits of consciousness.
And then there's us. Macro-level entities. We have macrophenomenal experiences. The rich, complex consciousness we know.
Exactly. And the specific flavor of panpsychism we're focusing on here, the one that really faces the combination problem squarely, is constitutive panpsychism.
Right, constitutive. Meaning our big experiences are grounded in, or somehow entirely made up of, those tiny little micro-experiences.
That's the claim. And within that, the most, let's say, philosophically interesting and frankly powerful version is constitutive Russellian panpsychism.
Okay, Russellian.
Yes. And it's key because it directly tackles one of the biggest objections to any non-physicalist view of mind: mental causation. How does mind affect matter?
Okay, hold on. That sounds extremely technical. Let's give the listener the shortcut here. Why does adding Russellian supposedly fix mental causation? And what on earth are quiddities?
Right, the shortcut. Okay. Physics tells us about fundamental properties like mass or charge. But physics really only describes what these properties do. Their effects, their causal roles.
How they interact, yeah.
Exactly. It doesn't tell us what mass or charge is intrinsically. Russellian panpsychism steps in and says, those microphenomenal properties, the little bits of consciousness, they're the quiddities.
Quiddities, the whatness.
The whatness, the intrinsic nature, the categorical guts of those physical properties. They are what mass or charge, say, feels like from the inside for that particle.
Whoa, okay.
So because these internal phenomenal properties are now defined as the very basis of the physical roles.
They automatically become causally effective because they are the things doing the physical work.
You got it. They're playing the physical roles described by physics. The phenomenal isn't some extra ghost floating above the machine.
It is the inner reality of the machine's parts.
Wow.
Okay, that is a powerful move, but I can immediately see how that boxes the theory in.
How so?
Well, you can't just invent new phenomenal rules willy-nilly, can you? If the phenomenal properties are the basis of physical properties, they have to behave exactly like the physics says they behave. They inherit all the constraints of physics.
Absolutely right. The constraints are immense. Which brings us back squarely to the combination problem, but now with these added Russellian strings attached.
Okay, so the pressure is really on this theory now. Let's break down this combination problem, because you mentioned it's not just one issue, right? It's more like a multi-pronged attack.
That's a good way to put it. It attacks the idea of constitution from several angles. First, maybe the most fundamental, is the subject combination problem.
The subject combination.
How do lots of little microsubjects, tiny centers of experience, combine to create one single new unified macrosubject? You. The person experiencing this.
And the specific challenge there is?
It's often called the subject summing problem. It's basically Jones's point again. Why should the mere existence of a group of little subjects, little points of view, automatically guarantee that a new, distinct, larger subject comes into being? It's not obvious that subjects just add up like that.
This feels like the core mind dust worry. How does the dust suddenly wake up and declare, I am one?
Exactly. That's the heart of it. Then second, even if you somehow solve the subject problem, you face the quality combination problem.
Okay, qualities, like colors, sounds.
Precisely. How do the basic, presumably very simple, primitive microqualities combine to generate the incredible complex and varied macroqualities we experience? Think about the phenomenal difference between seeing bright red, smelling coffee, feeling warmth.
Hearing a C-sharp note, feeling nostalgic. Yeah, it's incredibly diverse.
Incredibly diverse. And this leads directly to what's called the palette problem.
Palette problem.
Remember those Russellian constraints? We only have a handful of fundamental physical properties: mass, charge, spin. So if phenomenal properties are their quiddities, we probably only have a very small, limited palette of basic microqualities.
Like maybe only 5 or 6 basic feels at the fundamental level.
Something like that, yeah. So the question is, how can this incredibly limited set of basic feels generate the almost infinite variety of sensory experiences we have? Where do all the different colors, tastes, smells, emotions come from?
Okay. That's tough. And the third one?
The third is the structure combination problem. How does the structure of micro-experience, which, remember, under Russellianism, mirrors the fine-grained physical structure of matter, how does that combine to yield the very different large-scale structure of our conscious experience?
What do you mean by the structure of our experience?
Think about your visual field. It's unified, it has depth, objects are distinct, or how your senses feel like separate channels. Vision is different from hearing, or just your sense of time flowing smoothly. That's macro-experiential structure.
And this structural issue is particularly bad, you hinted earlier.
It's seen as potentially devastating. It's called the structural mismatch problem. Because the structure we introspect, our macrophenomenal structure, just seems radically different from the macrophysical structure, like the physical layout of neurons in the brain.
Right. I don't experience my brain firing. I experience this conversation.
Exactly. And if the microphenomenal structure is supposed to be the basis of microphysical structure, you'd expect their combination to mirror the combined physical structure.
Okay.
But it needs to yield the phenomenal structure, and they look completely different. That's the mismatch.
Wow. Okay. Subject, quality, structure. That's a lot.
And just briefly, to pile it on, there are related issues people talk about too. The unity problem, why is consciousness unify at all? The boundary problem, why does my consciousness seem to stop at my skull if the particles composing my chair are also conscious? And the grain problem, how does combining lots of distinct micro-experiences yield a smooth, continuous experience, like seeing a uniform field of red instead of a pixelated mess?
Yeah, it's a lot of problems. Yeah. So given this, orchestra of difficulties, as you called it, it's not surprising some philosophers argue the combination problem isn't just hard, it's actually impossible to solve.
Yeah.
Game over for constitutive panpsychism.
Right. There are arguments aiming for a full stop. One direct line of attack is the conceivability argument. This runs parallel to the famous philosophical zombie arguments against physicalism.
The zombie argument, like, could you have a perfect physical duplicate of me, behaving identically but with no inner conscious experience?
Exactly. But here, they propose a panpsychist zombie world. Imagine a world that's physically identical to ours, and it has all the correct microphenomenal properties assigned to all the fundamental
So
particles.
all the tiny bits of consciousness are there doing their thing.
But in this world, no macroscopic entity, like a human or an animal, is actually conscious. The microconsciousness never combines to form macroconsciousness.
And the argument is, if we can even conceive of such a world.
Then it's metaphysically possible. And if it's metaphysically possible for all the microfacts to be true without the macrofacts being true, then the macrofacts can't be constituted by the microfacts. The constitution relation itself would fail. The parts don't necessarily add up to the whole.
Okay, that's a conceptual challenge. But you mentioned another argument was seen as even more devastating.
Yes, the structural mismatch argument, which we touched on. It's often laid out as an inconsistent tetrad, basically, 4 statements that all seem plausible, or even required by the theory, but you can't hold all 4 simultaneously without reaching a contradiction.
Okay, this is the heavy hitter. Let's walk the listener through it carefully. Statement 1, the Russellian bit.
Statement 1. Microphenomenal structure is isomorphic. It has the same structure as microphysical structure. That comes from the idea that phenomenal properties are the quiddities of physical properties. Their structure must match.
Got it. Statement 2, the core panpsychist claim.
Statement 2. Microphenomenal structure constitutes macrophenomenal structure. The little structures build the big experiential structure. That's the heart of constitutive panpsychism.
Makes sense. Statement 3, standard physics.
Statement 3. Microphysical structure constitutes macrophysical structure. Little physical bits and their arrangements make up big physical things like brains. Pretty uncontroversial.
Right. And finally, statement 4, the one based on how things seem to us.
Statement 4. Macrophenomenal structure. What our consciousness is actually like is not isomorphic to macrophysical structure, the physical structure of the brain. As we said, we don't experience neuron patterns. We experience sights, sounds, thoughts. This seems pretty plausible based on introspection.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you accept all 4?
You get a contradiction. Look, if microphenomenal structure matches microphysical structure, 1, and microphysical structure builds macrophysical structure, 3, then microphenomenal structure should build something that matches macrophysical structure. But panpsychism says it builds macrophenomenal structure too, and that structure doesn't match the macrophysical structure 4. Something has to give.
So the conclusion is, if 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all true, then constitutive Russellian panpsychism must be false.
Wow. It forces the panpsychist's hand. To save the theory, you must deny one of those 4 statements. And each denial comes with its own significant costs and challenges. It really maps out the battlefield.
Okay.
So facing these intense arguments, especially the structural mismatch one, panpsychists generally go down one of 2 main paths. Either they find a way to dodge the combination problem altogether, these are the non-combinatorial responses,
Avoid the whole mess.
right? Or they bite the bullet and try to actually solve the combinatorial responses.
Okay, let's look at avoidance first. What's the main way to just sidestep combination?
The most straightforward way is emergent panpsychism. You still say the micro-level has consciousness, but you deny that macro-consciousness is constituted by it. Instead, you say macro experiences strongly emerge from the micro-level stuff.
Strongly emerge, meaning there are new fundamental laws of nature that say when micro experiences get arranged like this, your example in a brain, then poof, a new macro experience appears.
Essentially, yes. It's connected by contingent brute laws, not by being made at the lower level. It avoids the puzzle of how the parts make the whole.
But at a pretty steep price, right? Because now you sound a lot like old school dualism.
Exactly. You've basically traded the combination problem for the equally, if not more, intractable problem of mental causation. If this emergent macro consciousness isn't actually made of the physical stuff, how does it influence the physical brain? How do my thoughts lead to my actions?
You risk ending up with epiphenomenalism. Consciousness is just a byproduct that doesn't do anything. Or you need interactionist laws, which have their own deep problems.
Precisely. And some popular theories out there like Tononi's integrated information theory, IIT.
Yeah, I've heard of that. Measures consciousness with phi.
Right. Depending on how you interpret it, IIT can look like a form of emergent panpsychism. It might tell you that a system with high integrated information is conscious, but it doesn't inherently solve how that consciousness is constituted by the parts or how it gains causal power. It risks being emergentist.
Okay, so emergence is one way to dodge combination, but it brings back dualism's ghosts. Is there another avoidance strategy?
There is. It's called identity panpsychism. Here, the idea isn't combination or emergence. It's that macro experiences are simply identical to the micro experiences of some single, fundamental, holistic entity.
Wait, identical, not combined from parts, but just the same thing. How does that work?
The most discussed version relies on quantum holism. The idea is that you, your unified consciousness, are literally identical to the conscious experience of one single, incredibly complex, fundamental quantum entangled system, maybe a large-scale entangled system within your brain.
So no need to combine experiences from billions of separate particles because my consciousness is the experience of one big quantum thing already.
That's the proposal. It neatly bypasses combination, but, well, it has its own serious issues.
Like what?
For one, there are big empirical questions about whether the kind of large-scale, stable quantum entanglement needed could actually exist in a warm, wet brain. It's highly debated.
Decoherence and all that.
Right. But even setting that aside, the big theoretical problem is, guess what?
Let me guess.
Structural mismatch.
You got it. The structural mismatch worry comes right back. The mathematical structure of a complex quantum state, even a holistic one, looks profoundly different from the structure of our everyday conscious experience, our visual field, our thoughts. It's not clear at all why the experience of that quantum state should feel like this.
All right, so if the avoidance strategies, emergence, or identity run into their own major roadblocks, we're forced back to facing the combination problem head-on. We have to actually try and solve it. We do. And this is where panpsychists have rolled up their sleeves and gotten, well, pretty creative, trying to show how combination could actually work.
Where do they start? Tackling the subject problem seems primary. How do little subjects make a big one?
One early move was to try and deflate the subject. Maybe subjects aren't these robust, metaphysically fundamental things we think they are. Maybe they are constructed, or maybe they don't even really exist in the way we assume.
Didn't figures like Bertrand Russell and even William James sometimes lean towards eliminating the subject?
He flirted with it, yes. The idea being, if there are no fundamental subjects to begin with, maybe there's no subject combination problem. You just have streams or bundles of experiences.
But does that really help? If I still want to explain why I seem to exist as a single, unified, conscious entity, just getting rid of the subject label doesn't seem to solve the core issue. Doesn't it just become a bundle combination problem?
That's exactly the criticism. How do distinct bundles or streams of ownerless experiences combine to form one new unified stream that feels like mine? Feels like you've just shifted the bump in the rug. You haven't really made the problem disappear.
Seems like it. So what's a more positive proposal for subject combination?
The most talked about and arguably most promising positive solution is called phenomenal bonding.
Phenomenal bonding, like a special kind of conscious glue.
That's a pretty good analogy, actually. The idea is that microsubjects do constitute macrosubjects, but they do it via special phenomenal relations, a kind of intrinsic connection or bonding that holds between the microsubjects and their experiences.
Okay, and how does this fit with the Russellian picture? This bonding relation can't just be magic.
Right. In the Russellian framework, this phenomenal bonding relation itself would need to be the intrinsic quiddity underlying some physical relation. Maybe it's the inner nature of certain types of physical causation or spatial proximity, or perhaps quantum entanglement. The glue has to be the hidden nature of some physical connection we already know about.
So we're looking for a fundamental physical interaction whose inner nature is the experience of unity or bonding.
Precisely. But finding the right kind of bonding relation faces this legendary challenge, often described using the mythological monsters Scylla and Charybdis. It's a treacherous path to navigate.
Scylla and Charybdis, what's the danger on either side?
Okay, so Charybdis is the whirlpool of fragmentation. If your proposed bonding relation is too weak or too selective, it won't successfully bind enough micro-experiences together to form a robust, unified macro-subject like you. You just get disconnected fragments. That fails.
So you need a strong enough bond. But Scylla.
Scylla is the monster on the cliff. That's the danger if your bonding relation is too strong or too transitive. If the bond connects basically anything that's causally related or spatially near, you risk bonding everything together.
Leading to one giant universal consciousness, like the whole cosmos is one subject.
Exactly. A cosmic consciousness, which might be an interesting idea in itself, but it completely fails to explain why you feel like a distinct individual person separate from me or the chair or the planet. Why are there boundaries?
So the phenomenal bond has to be incredibly specific,
Yeah.
strong enough to unite everything that makes up me, but weak enough to stop dead at my boundary and not unite me with you or anything else.
It has to be perfectly tuned. Explaining why it has just the right scope, why it selectively operates only within, say, a single organism, is an enormous challenge for phenomenal bonding theories.
Huge challenge. Okay, what about the quality problem? The palette issue. If we only have a few basic microfeels, how do we get reds, greens, pains, joys?
This is tackled by what are called small palette solutions. The core idea here is that, yes, the fundamental palette is small, but the vast array of macro qualities we experience aren't new fundamental qualities themselves. Instead, they're generated through complex processing of those few basic elements.
Processing by what?
By our high-level cognitive systems, essentially. The brain takes the few basic microfeels coming in, and through processes, sometimes described metaphorically as confusion or refraction, generates the complex macro qualities. Think of how a prism refracts white light into colors.
So phenomenal redness isn't fundamental. It's what happens when my brain processes certain combinations or structures of the real fundamental microfeels in a specific way.
That's the kind of idea. But again, the challenge is avoiding a new explanatory gap. Why should processing microfeel X, Y, and Z in pattern P necessarily result in the specific, seemingly irreducible quality of phenomenal redness, rather than just a complex pattern of X, Y, and Z feels?
Yeah, how does the confusion create something genuinely new feeling?
To make this work constitutively, without just being emergentism in disguise, you need to argue there are very strong, probably non-obvious necessary truths connecting the micropatterns to the macro qualities. You need to show that, metaphysically, that micropattern just is redness, even if it's not obvious to us beforehand. That's a very heavy philosophical lift.
Okay, we have definitely completed the deep dive into the constraints here. It's clear that the constitutive Russellian panpsychist has an incredibly difficult task. They need to show our complex macro experience is entirely built from a tiny set of primitive properties and relations at the micro level.
And crucially, without just inventing new fundamental laws of nature to bridge the gap, that's the constitutive requirement.
Our sources weren't kidding when they described it as like trying to juggle 7 balls in the air with both hands tied behind one's back. The constraints are just extraordinary.
They really are. But the sheer difficulty also helps to highlight where the most promising work needs to be done, doesn't it? If there was a solution, it likely lies in tackling those 3 core problems we discussed.
Right. So developing phenomenal bonding theories for the subject problem.
Exploring small qualitative palettes and how cognitive processing might generate complexity for the quality problem.
And, maybe most critically, finding plausible principles of informational composition. Rules that show how microstructures combine to form macro-phenomenal structure, perhaps based on information integration rather than just physical proximity, to tackle that huge structural mismatch.
Exactly. That structural mismatch argument really feels like the crux.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you, the listener. You've heard the arguments, particularly the power of that structural mismatch argument laid out as the inconsistent tetrad.
Those 4 statements that can't all be true together.
Because those premises are so clear, and the conclusion that the theory is false if they're all true is so stark it forces the issue. Every serious proponent of this kind of panpsychism must find a way to deny one of those 4 claims.
They have to choose their poison, essentially.
And where they choose to push back, denying that microphenomenal mirrors microphysical, or denying micro constitutes macro, or denying the mismatch itself, that choice will fundamentally shape their entire theory of consciousness. So understanding the combination problem, especially the structural mismatch, isn't just some historical footnote.
No, not at all.
It's the sharpest tool you now possess for evaluating whether any theory aiming to ground consciousness in the fundamental constituents of the world can actually succeed.
You're now equipped, really, to follow and critically assess the absolute cutting edge of this philosophical debate.
Thank you for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.